Nigeria's tax revenue profile currently presents a complex picture. The tax-to-GDP ratio, a crucial indicator of a country's tax performance, has historically been below the desirable levels for sustained economic development. At a revised estimate of about 10.86% at the end of 2021, Nigeria's tax-to-GDP ratio pales in comparison to those of its African peers and lags behind the regional average of 15.6%. To change the narrative, the President Bola Tinubu administration inaugurated a Fiscal Policy and Tax Committee to enhance revenue collection efficiency, ensure transparent reporting, and promoting the effective utilization of tax and other revenues to boost citizens' tax morale, foster a healthy tax culture, and drive voluntary compliance. So how will this translate to more revenue for the government in 2024? This morning, joining me to talk about this is Abiodun Kayode Ali, is an economist and senior manager at PwC. Thank you so much for joining us on Business Edge.
Good morning. Thank you for having me, Lipo.
It's a pleasure. Now, President Tinubu's administration has made known its interest in boosting revenue generation through tax reforms, and the committee, saddled with the responsibility, has also made known its desire to increase tax-GDP ratio to about 18% from an estimated average of 10.8% in 2021, outpacing the regional average of 15.6%. How ambitious is this, or would you say it's a little bit over the top?
Yeah, thank you, Lincoln. That's a very wonderful question. From my own perspective, I don't think it's ambitious. So firstly, the target of 18% was given till the period of 2026. So it's not something they are going to jump straight to, right, from 10% to 18%, but it's something they will do within the next 3 years. And I think it's something that is actually doable. So if you consider the parameters, you are looking at the taxes you are collecting based on the gross domestic product of that particular economy, Nigeria in this case. Now, considering the fact that our GDP is actually quite large, you would normally expect that at least 30% of the activities that are taking place in a particular region in Nigeria would give rise to that GDP, will give rise to taxes rather. And that's exactly what we see in developed economies, like the OECD nations, the advanced nations. They are doing somewhere within the range of 33%, and that should be the norm. But Africa doing the average of 12 to 15% is basically because of a lack of advancement when it comes to data capturing, right? So as long as we're able to identify taxpayers and we're able to make our laws clear and distinct, it shouldn't be a problem going above that average of 15%. So I do see the 18% as something doable within the next 3 years, as long as the government is willing to implement the reforms and the report of the committee. I think it's something that is quite doable.
Well, despite the fact that the country has huge potential in that aspect, we still see that grapples with challenges in its tax system. There is the larger informal sector. You've also talked about a poor tax database, and there's also the endemic issue of entrenched tax evasion practices. Now, how can the country cross over these hurdles if it hopes to achieve its goals?
Yeah, that's also another great question. So if you consider the state of the country, right? So there is a lack of political will, right? There is that laxity, right? There is that lethargy when it comes to getting things done, right? I can assure you that if Nigeria were run by a private company, I can assure you this would have been easier done. But you are quite right. Given the fact that we have about 226 million people, the question is, how much data do we have concerning these people? Nigeria is a country whereby it's so easy to lose track of things that are going on, and things can easily go under the carpet, right? So I think one important thing, like I said earlier, is we being able to harmonize data. And that's one of the first things that the committee is working on. There's something referred to as data for tax. Now, this was a project that had been ongoing in the previous administration, but it's something that this committee is currently picking up and they are working on. So the key thing here is how much data are you able to capture? You know, in Nigeria, we have lots of data identification numbers. We have our national identification number, the NIN. We have the bank verification number, the BVN. You have even your your what's it called, your driver's license. We have so many of these things. It will be quite useful if we can harmonize all this information regarding our citizens, our individuals. And that's what we see in the advanced nations, whereby they have a social insurance number, a single identification number. So if you look at East Africa, I think East Africa are doing quite well in terms of data capturing. So I know Kenya, for instance, are trying to introduce next month a kind of e-identification tag, right? That is going to be given to every citizen, every individual that is in that country. So even right from when you are a child, right, you have this number, and by the time you get to the age of 18, that becomes your identification number, your national ID number, and you are able to use that number to get access to so many things. So if we can do that data harmonization, something similar in Nigeria, that will go a long way to help. Then also in terms of evasion, one thing I know is that a lot of Africans, Nigerians especially, they evade taxes because they don't even see the benefits of some of these taxes that are being collected. And you can't blame them because we have different individuals collecting taxes. Apart from the federal government collecting its own taxes, you also have a situation where non-state actors are collecting taxes. And the question is, what is the government doing about these non-state actors? Even to some extent, you begin to wonder that it looks like even the government is letting these non-state actors play their role as a sort of compensation, right? A political compensation. So I think if government is serious about implementing this, I think this is something that is quite doable. Then one other key thing that is quite important is, like I said, apart from the fact that government has to do something with respect to how it's utilizing the taxes that are being collected, I think one other key thing that is important is being able to explain most of these tax laws, break them down. What are the compliance obligations of individuals, of companies? Can we simplify most of these tax laws? Because most of these tax laws, they have ambiguities in them. And these are sometimes led cases, right, to be decided at courts, at tribunals, right? So I think if we can break down these tax laws, we can make them simple. We can also identify who are responsible, the people who are responsible for collecting them. And we can also show or prove to the people the benefits they gain from paying taxes. I think this will go a long way in enhancing and improving on compliance. And these are some of the things that the current committee have actually captured in their quick win report.
And now, still talking about tax evasion, we know that there are some companies, some international or foreign companies who operate within Nigeria's business environment, but then do not have a fiscal office or have a fiscal space in Nigeria, domiciled in Nigeria, whereby the Nigerian government can always go to and ensure that they comply with their tax obligations. So when it comes to the digital economy and these companies within this spectrum, how do you think that the government can go about ensuring that they pay their taxes, whether or not they have a fiscal representation within Nigeria's business space?
Yeah, that's also another great question, Leko. So currently, the government has actually put in place, made some updates to the tax laws, right? There have been some amendments to actually capture activities of non-resident companies that are carrying economic activities to a significant level in such a way that they are going to be taxed. If we take out treaties, because sometimes we have treaties with some of these countries, and it's those treaties that actually determine how they will be taxed. But if we exclude the treaties, so Nigerian tax law currently actually captures these companies. So I think one good way government can actually still ensure that these companies pay their taxes is by looking at who are the parties they are probably transacting with, right? So government could also reach out to the parties that are receiving the services. So in a situation whereby it's a company to a company, right? I understand there might be instances where it becomes complicated, whereby it's now a company, the business, providing these services to individuals, right? And it might be difficult to track in such instances. So I think a good avenue would then be to probably see if these companies have a kind of representative office locally. And in situations where they don't have representative offices locally, you then need to see what is the medium through which they are carrying out these transactions. So, we have lots of digital companies that are responsible for payments, right? The tax authorities have put it in their law that they can actually appoint some of these agents, some of these facilitators, trade facilitators and payment facilitators, such that these guys are able to impose or deduct the necessary taxes. So I think these are some of the measures that can be taken. And even globally, right? So there are other organizations that are trying to assist developing countries like Nigeria in also collecting their fair share of taxes whenever these non-resident companies are carrying out activities digitally. So we have organizations like the OECD. There's something referred to as the Inclusive Framework, and we have the United Nations also assisting, and there is also another organization referred to as the Africa Tax Administrative Forum. So we have organizations that are actually helping to assist Nigeria with respect to this, and also there are also bilateral agreements between tax authorities whereby tax authorities in Nigeria and tax authorities in those jurisdictions are cooperating together to report these activities. So I think these are some of the measures that can be taken. And I think to a reasonable extent, the FIRS, the Federal Inland Revenue Service, is actually doing a good job with respect to this.
Let's now look at the issue of tax incentives. It's been said that some sectors of the economy need waivers to encourage production and investment. However, there are also concerns about Nigeria losing about 6 trillion naira to tax waivers annually. So in the bid to strike a balance, looking at this, what do you think must be done? Because in as much as you're trying to provide incentives and encourage compliance, the Nigerian government will also want to ensure that it's able to rake in revenue from these businesses and individuals. So how do we ensure a balance in this regards?
Okay, yeah, that's also a fantastic question. Yeah, waivers generally are given in order to incentivize businesses, right, to ensure that they're actually meeting a need, probably in sectors that are probably not well developed in the country, right? So yes, there's been an abuse in the way waivers have been given in the country. So from my own perspective, I think one thing that is important is the federal government, right? The federal government needs to do a lot when it comes to how it gives these waivers, because even the laws, our current tax laws, require that there should be a form of analysis. There should be an analysis of what are the benefits, the cost-benefit analysis, right? What are the benefits that you strive to get when it comes to giving out these waivers? So I think all these things need to be looked at diligently in our laws, right? And I think the National Assembly, they themselves also probably need to do a lot of reading, right, when it comes to some of these benefits, because they themselves also sometimes give approvals, right? So I think it's quite important that government actually does that cost-benefit analysis. Some of the waivers that are given, such as exemptions of VAT on some important items, I think those ones, they have a positive socio-economic value to people, right? Because it's all about the people. The laws are made for the people. So I think in those regards, you can consider the validity of such waivers, such as the removal of VAT on liquefied petroleum gas, the cooking gas, and also the removal of VAT on CNG, which has been imported and is a cheaper source of fuel currently. So you can actually acknowledge the benefits you get from such waivers. But certain waivers given to companies in certain sectors that are producing items that we already have in abundance or we are not lacking, I think those ones need to be considered. So I think this is something that the ministries need to look in on an annual basis, even on a half-year basis and a quarterly basis. So I do agree with you. I think this is something that the government really needs to look at, especially when it comes to the benefits that we get from such waivers. Because like you said, the 6 trillion that you actually referred to, that 6 trillion represents about 60% of the revenue that was collected by FIRS in 2022. FIRS collected 10 trillion. So that's actually quite a lot. So by the time you exclude the relevant ones, the useful ones, the waivers should actually be a lot less. That's what I think.
Now, let's quickly look at the elephant in the room, and that has to do with tax multiplicity. Now, for businesses in Nigeria, one of the major challenges they face is the issue of multiple taxation on all fronts, from the governments, the government at the center, to sub-national levels. Of course, we still see taxes being collected, and the committee has said it is hoping to harmonize its taxation plans. And we also know that some of these collections are carried out by unregistered individuals or probably companies. So isn't this going to be an uphill task when it comes to addressing the bottlenecks in terms of multiple taxation and ensuring that there's accountability and ensuring that people pay their taxes and ensuring that people reap the dividends of their obligation to their country?
Yeah, thank you, Liko. You're right. That's actually the big elephant in the room. And I think I'm quite glad that that's even one of the key priorities of the current committee, right? So, like you said, the multiple taxation, one thing it's doing is that it's actually stifling businesses, right? Right from companies, right? Their operations. You see a situation whereby a company are paying something like 60 taxes, right? Which doesn't make sense, especially in a situation whereby we're trying to strive for growth employment, right? So we shouldn't be seeing a situation whereby these companies are paying multiple taxes. And even when you come down to the individual level, you see people who are struggling to make ends meet, paying all sorts of taxes, wheelbarrow taxes, market taxes, keke napep taxes, bicycle taxes, a lot of them. Some of these taxes, even though they are officially in the tax laws, these are things that need to be addressed. So one thing that needs to be done is that the state government need to cooperate with this with the federal government. There needs to be a discussion because do you know the interesting thing, Lekon? These taxes that we're speaking about, all these multiple taxes, the numerous taxes, they account for only a small percentage of what we collect as revenue as a country. If you look at the tax that was collected in 2022, the 10 trillion that was collected by the Federal Land Revenue Service, would you believe that about 42% is being accounted for by petroleum profit tax, 26% is being accounted for by companies' income tax, another 25% is being accounted for by VAT, and you have your tertiary education tax accounting for 3%. So these four taxes that I've mentioned, they've already accounted for about 90% of the taxes that we collect as a country. So these little taxes that we're referring to that are being collected by non-state actors is not benefiting the government, it's not benefiting the individuals. It's a lose-lose for both government and individual, and it's just a win for a few, right? So I think one important thing that the government needs to do is to implement the committee's report, because what they've strived or what they want to do is to reduce it to 10 taxes, right? So it does make sense that the state governments are able to put their foot down and stop most of these non-state actors who are actually collecting these illegal taxes, if I can use that word, and work in conjunction with the government, because the truth is that if you look at the taxes that will be collected once you address this issue of multiplicity of taxes, it's going to go way higher than what we are currently collecting, and that will be a win-win for everyone. So I think it's something that is actually doable, and I think what the government needs to do is just develop that political will and the attitude to actually collect the correct taxes and let go of any irrelevant taxes that won't be of benefit to anyone. So those are my thoughts with respect to multiplicity of taxes.
All right, before I let you go, let me just quickly chip this in. Now, we have the West African Tax Administration that has been coordinating and trying to improve tax system within the region. Now, just in about a minute, what's your assessment of these tax administration in the region, and how would you describe their role and their contribution, and how do you think the Nigerian government can tap into that resource to improve its tax administration? You know, we've talked about revenues that is to come in and the need to digitize the system and all whatnot. So how do we tap into that resource to achieve that?
Yeah, thank you. Another great question. So, given the fact that the way the world is going currently, right? So, West Africa is kind of consists of integrated economies, right? So I think one important thing that we need to do is to learn from each other. That's exactly what the West Africa Tax Forum is actually into, right? So you have a situation whereby they organize programs and they bring in the tax authorities from each of these regions, right? Each individual countries to come and share experiences, right? So it's more of a knowledge sharing session as well as a brainstorming session. So I think these kind of meetings are actually quite useful. One other thing that I think is quite key is that even the recommendations that are being given, I think it's quite important that most of these recommendations are always implemented or revisited at subsequent meetings, because most of these gatherings and meetings that is being held, the purpose of having these meetings is not just to take stock counts and things like that. The most important thing is implementing them, right? So I think to a reasonable extent, their role is actually quite relevant, especially in terms of knowledge sharing. So I think it's something that the Nigerian government can actually key into.
Abiodun Kayode Ali, economist and senior manager at PwC, thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Liko.
We go on a short break, and when we return, we'll bring you international business stories. Don't go away. Nigeria, Africa's most populous nation, is a familiar giant on the global stage, but its economic story, heavily reliant on oil export, paints an incomplete picture. As the world shifts towards renewable energy and volatile oil prices threaten stability, diversifying export revenues and avenues has become a national imperative. 2024 presents a crucial year for this endeavor, demanding targeted action across various sectors. So this morning, Bamidele Ayemibo, who's an export consultant, will be talking to us on this. It's nice, and it's a pleasure having you around.
Yeah, good morning. Thank you for having me.
From your perspective, what are the biggest obstacles to diversifying Nigeria's exports beyond oil?
All right. The diversification drive, I think, is more of political will on the part of the government than a number of other issues. It's more of political will. The new administration has been on now for more than 6 months, even though we have someone at the helm of affairs of Nigerian Super Promotion Council. A number of efforts is being made by her, but at the level of the presidency, we've not seen a lot in terms of a deliberate step and effort in that direction. And this has happened across different administrations. You see a situation in which we know as a country we need to grow forex generation, non-oil export, but you can't see deliberate effort in that direction. For example, if you want to grow non-oil export in Nigeria, we need to have facility to support financing export that is easily accessible to everybody that is qualified. Number two, we need a framework that allows people to take bigger risk within that sector by virtue of export credit insurance. Number three, we need to deliberately increase the number of businesses that are exporting in Nigeria. Last year, we're still waiting for the data of last year, 2022, the NPC CEO confirmed that we have 1,172 exporters. Some countries like Ghana, South Africa, some other have 5,000, 10,000, 20,000. US over 200,000. UK over 100,000 in a country that is in size smaller than Nigeria. So this deliberate step, and even when government functionaries give speeches around economy and what they are doing, we've not seen a lot of effort in this regard. So I don't want to say it's too early in the day, but we're in a new year, so we're hoping that maybe from this year we'll begin to see some of those things that we think the government should begin to look at to be able to grow non-oil exports in Nigeria.
Yes, even as we delve into what is to be expected in this new year, we know that oil and gas exports still account for about over 80% of Nigeria's total exports. And the talk has always been about the government not having that political will, and the government not doing enough to support non-oil exports and businesses in order to liberate its economy. Now, looking at this administration, we have a 2024 budget that's already in place, and we've seen different policies of government and body language of this particular administration. Do you think there's anything that points to the fact that it is hoping to shift away from the norm and try as much as possible to start looking at areas whereby it can further open up its economy?
So far, no. So far, no. You know, NEPC got a 50 billion just after COVID to support non-oil export, and the money got to a number of Nigerians, businesses, and sincerely, I can say today, I know people that, but for that money, they will not be able to build their factory or expand their factory the way it is to boost their production because of that grant. I didn't see that in this budget. I don't know what the Ministry of Trade is doing. I don't know if they have that in mind, but I know typically if this is in the works, they will have mentioned it, will have been in the news, they will have announced it, just like the way they did at that administration. So I'm not seeing anything, any unique initiative that is going to change the way we do things, the way it is right now. I can't now. I might be wrong. Maybe, I mean, as the vet on will be able to, but as far as I'm concerned, based on the budget I presented, I can't see that yet.
Now, are there any specific sectors or industries that you believe hold the most potential for export growth in 2024 for Nigeria?
Yes. Now, this is the way we should look at it. If you look at the total global export, it's about $24.5 trillion. Global export, $24.5 trillion. Now, out of that, that's trade in goods. Trade in services is about 6 trillion. So total trade in the world is about 30 trillion. Out of that, about 60% is intermediate goods. And I will explain that. About 20% is primary product. About 20% is finished goods. Now, by intermediate good, I mean from cocoa to cocoa butter, from cashew to cashew kernel, from shea nut to shea butter, from lead to lead ingot. You see those intermediate products, the demand for them is now on the rise because a lot of developed countries, they don't want to buy primary commodity the way they used to because the effluent is affecting the environment. And this issue around environmental stability is making some of them not to want to process some of those primary commodities in their environment to preserve the environment. So most of them are processed in the country where they are produced or in other developing countries. So if we want to grow non-oil export in Nigeria, we don't need to focus on finished product. We need to begin to look at how do we tap into this intermediate product that, according to WHO, is taking about 50 to 60% of the volume of export in the world. We need to be very strategic. So we need to begin to check how we can process into those intermediate products and take a position in that way. What that will do for us as a nation is to create jobs back at home and make us to earn more. It will make us to earn more in terms of effects rather than staying with primary commodity. But for that to happen, government will need to support from power. Now, because we have issue with power and logistics and road, government will need to give a lot of incentive. The last administration was doing an incentive for exporters that was stopped, although the argument was that, okay, FX then there was about 300 naira difference. The IE window was about 400 and something. Parallel market was 700 and something. And that's government was trying to ensure they cover the gap of the exchange differentials. But beyond that, because I'm going to export, Red Sea is currently having issue. It's making cost of shipment to be going up by 40, 50, 60%. So it's a big issue for shipping, and the cost of shipment is high. What countries are doing is to support the businesses to be able to keep growing. I mean, farmers are having issue in Germany because government support them. They want more subsidy to be able to do more. So if you want us to be able to grow non-oil export, there must be subsidy, there must be support. Now, it's not subsidy where you hand over money. You can decide that, okay, freight from Nigeria, our major destination, let's say India, freight from Nigeria, let's say is 1,500, you want to pay 50% of it. So, and that means the shipping line send the list of shipment that was done with the bill of lading and container number they can reference, and government can credit them directly. That way we can see the money going to the productive sector of economy to be able to assist businesses in logistics, in shipment, different kind of subsidy to be able to increase the volume of production so that we can begin to, even though my cost of production is high, the subsidy of government, the support of government is dropping my cost and still making me profitable. But I think we should focus on, irrespective of the sector, intermediate product. Either you are dealing with commodity, agro-commodity, or you are dealing with solid minerals. Dealing on intermediate product or finished product should be an area the government needs to take very seriously.
So that will now bring us to the point where we begin to ask ourselves, where will the government raise, or how will the government raise the funds to support or to provide a subsidy along this sector? Because the notion or the feelers we keep getting is that this government is cash-strapped. There are a lot of challenges affecting the Nigerian economy. There are debts being paid, and the government is saying it's not having enough funds to. There's even a deficit in the budget, and there aren't enough funds to run with the budget for the fiscal year. So, how do you think the Nigerian government can raise the revenue for that? We know that there are equally issues around the agricultural sector. There's the herders-farmer clashes. There's the insurgent attacks going on. Investors are scared to put their money into the Nigerian economy because of its volatility. They're not sure they're able to reap dividends. Where will the cash come from for the Nigeria to support this sector?
Now, for cash, I don't think the issue of Nigeria is cash. I'll look at it from two perspectives. First one, I think sometimes we have misplaced priorities. So look at the issue that have happened now with this scandal in the Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs. Look at this that have happened. Instead of giving handouts to Nigerians, why don't we support this manufacturing sector to create more jobs so that the people can be more engaged rather than giving handouts? Because the disbursing of funds directly, for me, it's also a way of impoverishing the people because it doesn't make the people productive. Apart from maybe people that are old, that can't work again, apart from those ones, but a number of other people, because they are poor, why don't we channel that money? Can we channel that money to help manufacturing sector to grow and create more jobs? Because the money is being stolen already. So we should evaluate our priorities. Where are we putting the money? Can we begin to channel some of the money we are putting into some of these areas? For example, when you hear that government is spending about 5 or 6 billion to build a car park for legislation, that's not a priority for us. We can reprioritize and tell ourselves, okay, what do we really want to do? We want to increase employment. Okay, how do we increase employment? We need to grow the production, both the the primary production and manufacturing. Now, let me now tell you another thing the government can do. In the oil and gas sector today, one of the ways government make money is by joint venture arrangement that allow the oil major to drill the oil, but for whatever they get out of the ground, government get a percentage directly. Why can't we do the same in mining? What we have in Nigeria, we have billions of tons in deposit for coal, millions of tons in deposit for lead and zinc. We have a lot of minerals. So government can have technical partners who will come and do the mining, and government have a sharing formula with them. If we want to generate income, we can. What we have done is, because we make a lot of money from crude oil, we have not harnessed other sector of the economy where the government can make more money. I think there is a need for a lot of rethinking to be able to generate income directly, not just in taxes, but direct income the way we have it in the oil and gas sector.
Yes, talking about rethinking, we need to refocus and look at other industries like the creative industry, the e-commerce industry, and we know that these two areas also have potential for growth and revenue contribution to the Nigerian economy. But then when we look at these two areas, that is the e-commerce and the creative industry, what are the barriers, what are the challenges, and how do you think that the Nigerian government can tap into the resource they provide if it hopes to improve its economic prospects?
Service exports is what you're talking about. Service export is about, out of the $30 trillion trade in the world, service export is about 5 to 6 trillion, if not going to 7 trillion already. So what we've not done as a nation is to formalize this sector. For example, in Nigeria, if you are exporting, you fill an application form for export of goods. Can we have an application form for export of services? Number one, there must be sensitization on export of services. There are businesses in Nigeria who can export their services. For example, as a business, we have people that are not in Nigeria that subscribe to our service from outside the country. That is service export. If you are a consultant in Nigeria and you consult for businesses outside Nigeria, that is service export. So what government need to do is they need to now make available a modality to document this service export in the creative industry, in the e-commerce sector, document this service export so that when I render service, and there are different modes of service export, either because I'm here and I'm rendering the service and delivering through the internet, or I travel about to deliver the service, or someone comes to my location to receive the service. These are all service sectors. So we need to come up with modalities to document, just the way we have a way of documenting non-oil tangible good export. We can do the same for intangible service export. But to get people to fill those forms and document it, government must incentivize. Generally people tend to want to cover up what they are doing that people will not know for a reason best known to them. But you can actually incentivize if people know, oh, if I declare this particular service and I'm going to get a particular support from the government or incentive from the government, that will also encourage people to declare, and we can begin to capture this service export within the Nigerian economy.
And finally, to wrap things up, we know that there are different arrangements or programs within African countries to help boost trade, cargo movement, and all that. Notably, of all of them is the AfCFTA. That particular agreement is said to be pivotal for the growth of Nigeria's economy, intra-trade movement, and all that. So how can Nigeria leverage its regional trade agreements to boost non-oil exports?
You know, the regional trade is still the same problem. It doesn't matter whether I'm shipping to Europe, Asia, and America. Number one, AfCFTA, trading has started. Nigeria has not started trading. Now, when I talk about political will, that's exactly what I'm talking about. Nigeria wanted to even host the headquarters of this. We could not hold that headquarters because we didn't sign on time. Now we've signed, we've ratified, but we have not started trading. The modality for trading is out. I understand the Fiscal administration already presented to the private sector input, and they're supposed to move it to the president for approval. That approval is yet to come out. So that's what I said when I said, I'm not seeing Minister of Trade, I'm not seeing the president and his handler talking about how it is important for Nigeria to grow non-oil export. How it's important. I don't know what is in the works they're doing, but it's something we need to talk about. So now, for example, the president should be talking about AfCFTA. The National Action Committee chairman should be reporting to the AfCFTA. Let me give you another example of this issue. Do you know sometimes an agency of government is charging, for example, airport? An NEPC official at an event have talked about the fact that landing fee of airline is high. The cost of is making the cost of shipment by air to be high. They wrote them to say how they can work on that fee. The fund did not agree, but both of them are reporting to the same government. Imagine if NEPC director is reporting to the presidency, and this issue can be ironed out directly. I think we help us, either AfCFTA or others.
Bamdele Ayemibo, exports consultant. I see how passionate you are about Nigeria. I will hope that all these will be taken into consideration by the Nigerian government. We appreciate your contribution anyway, most especially for gracing our show. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for having me.
Now, diversifying Nigeria's exports is not just an economic imperative, but a chance to redefine its narrative on the global stage. Economic experts believe by harnessing its diverse potential, nurturing entrepreneurship, and creating a supportive environment, 2024 can be a year Nigeria truly steps beyond the black gold and shines as the multifaceted economic powerhouse. And we hope that that will happen soon. Thank you so much for being part of today's edition of Business Edge. Do not forget that you can visit our social media handles at News Central TV. It's the headline, and you can also visit our websites www.newscentral.africa, and you call the download our mobile app on App Store and Play Store. Thank you so much for being part of it. I am Lekon Obanjo. Enjoy your day.